Welcome, everybody. John Reed Austin here for Primer to Torah. We are live and we are alive. Just so good to be back again after a week. We are going to continue with our study of the Mazorot, which is the heavens that declare the glory of God. The earth shows forth its majesty. So we are going to go ahead and get started. First off, I just want to kind of give you a little update on some things. We're coming up on Passover, and I want you to know that I do have a product that's available on our website. Of course, it's wineoilbreadforheart.org. You can go on there and you can order this product. It's specifically for the season of Passover. It's called the Counting of the Omer. So for 50 days after starting at Passover, the tradition is that 8 verses are read every day from Psalm 119. This is actually a 22-hour teaching about Psalm 119. So if you would like to follow the counting of the Omer, this would be a huge blessing to you because you'll go into in-depth study of the Hebrew letters and how each line of text starts with the subsequent Hebrew letter. So Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, He, and so on. And there's even key words in each of the line of text that match up with that Hebrew letter. So I think you really enjoy this. Also, a lot of what I'm teaching is based on a USB teaching that has about the equivalent of 16 DVDs. This is what I call my magnum opus. I talked about this last week. Well, we're going to be covering some of the material in here, but what I'm going to do is merge what's happening currently right now in the heavens. Yes, it's like a newspaper in the heavens. Here in Denver, they'd say, what does the Post say? Well, I'll tell you what does the cosmos say? There are some amazing events that have been going on, and I'm going to get you caught up with that. We also have a video that I just put up last Sunday on my YouTube channel, and it's only about 8 or 9 minutes, and it's our trip overview of our trip to Juarez, Mexico. We did a mission trip, in case you missed us last week, and it just kind of gives you a synopsis of some of the concerts that I did and some things that we were preaching there. We helped take a trailer full of toys for the kids that are homeless. There's this landfill where about 100 kids all gathered there, and I gave them a free concert. And then we went into some area where drug dealers are. And then we went to this church and we gave away more stuff, and it just literally emptied out the trailer. And there's a future event coming up here. So for those of you who may be in the neck of the woods where I'm going to be heading, we're going to be during Passover, which will be next Friday, a week from this Friday. Passover arrives, and I'm going to be in Villa, Indiana, to do a concert following Passover. So it'll be Saturday, the 16th of April, and it's going to be at Messiah's New Life Tabernacle in Villa, Indiana. That's Avilla. If you'd like more information, please go to our website and post your questions to me. It's wineoilbreadforheart.org. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Last week, we went through 3 sets of 40. Let's try that again. 7 40-day markers divided into 3. So each 40-day marker set was times 3, so a period of 120 days. So we're done with that, but I'm just going to kind of give you a quick review so that we can take off where we left off. All right, so we have we talked about how the very first, I should say, the first 3 40-day markers started with a solar eclipse that was in 2017, and it was followed by the Revelation 12 sign, and you see that right up on the top, those little boxes there. The Revelation 12 sign occurred on Rosh Hashanah that year, and then it represented the man-child being taken into the wilderness, and we counted 1,260 days. And so there was 3 blood moons that was after that, and it started with a feast day called Tabernacles. And then it continued all the way for 120 days to the first blood moon. And then the next 177 days later, there was the second blood moon, and 177 days, the third blood moon. And then from Sukkot to January 31st was the first blood moon. And then from Passover, 120 days was the second blood moon. And then the third set was September 28th, which is Sukkot again, going all the way to the third blood moon. All right, now we have going to the next slide. Here is the Revelation 12 sign that I was just talking about. And it reads, "Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. That being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth." And then in Revelation 12, continuing on to the next slide, this is another sign that appeared in heaven. "Behold, a great fiery red dragon having 7 heads, 10 horns, 7 diadems on his heads. His tail drew a third of the stars." Now, we are talking about stars, right? Did you know that stars are also called host of heaven? But guess what else is called host of heaven? Angels. That's right. So, and even prophets are known as stars. And remember that Abraham was told to give an account, or make an inventory of stars, and that your descendants would be like the stars in the heavens. Okay, so whenever we see the word stars, this gives you an idea of what it's talking about. It's an idiom or a metaphor. All right, so the third of the stars, what would that be? There was a third of angels that were taken out of heaven because they committed high treason along with Lucifer. So the third of the stars of heaven threw them out to the earth, and the dragon, representing Hasatan, Satan, stood before the woman who was ready to give birth. So we're talking about the birth of Messiah to devour her child. You notice it's uppercase C, child, representing the Messiah, as soon as it was born. He tried to kill him. Well, she bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God that he should feed her there. That's like being fed into the Torah, the teaching and instruction of God. You're a learned student of the teachings and instructions of God. So this we are to be fed, it says here, 1,260 days. Now, this could have dual reference meanings, but one of the things that's very interesting is that 1,260 days, and we'll go to the next slide. You see, we talked about how it was, there was a period of time that took place from the Rosh Hashanah. Yeah, and yes, that's the correct slide. And so this right here, we're looking at Ophiuchus crushing the head of the serpent. So this is based on Genesis 3:15, that it was a prophetic look at the future of what the Messiah would do. And so he is called the serpent holder here, or Ophiuchus, crushing the head of the serpent, and the serpent, or the scorpion in this case, is bruising the heel. And notice we talked about how it was trying to reach up to get this crown called Corona Borealis. And there was this period of time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. There was a period of 8 days, and the man-child would be taken to the temple and would be circumcised. And if you count forward 1,260 days, we come to Friday the 13th, when the flu epidemic took place, and everybody had to kind of take cover for a while. So then we have, there was actually an event on October 1st. And so if we go to the next slide, this is from Skyview. And you see on October 1st, 2017, you see the planet Saturn was right there in the thigh. And we talked about how Saturn is an evil planet, and it represents the end of something or hidden wisdom. It could be, a dual pattern, a positive or a negative influence. It just depends on the circumstances. So we go to the next slide, and of course, from that time, October 1st to March the 13th, 2020, then we had this cold flu that came in. And then we go to the next slide. It was 13 days after that it was Microsoft submitted an application to have a resolve to this situation. And it was all planned because, when you think about it, Friday the 13th, do you really think God would decide to do something on our benefit on Friday the 13th? So, I think, Hasatan knows about the end of days. He knows about what's happening in the heavens. And so he makes up his own plan. So they kind of mock God and think, we'll do our little counterfeit version of how we're going to handle this. But it's really interesting that 13 days later, and you see there Getty the sea goat, otherwise known as Capricorn, you have 3 planets that are really close together there. You have Jupiter, the king planet, you have Mars, the war planet, and Saturn, the Hasatan planet. And they're all in close proximity to the nose of Getty. So what we see here is that at the time, Donald Trump was considered like a King Cyrus. So he was represented by Jupiter, and Mars at the time was this flu. And then you have Saturn, which was going a little bit slower than Jupiter. So this was becoming sort of drawing together. And eventually Jupiter would actually pass over, and it would represent a death or an end to a reign of a king. And so we know that, but what was happening here is on 26th of March was when this application became a what is called a patent. And it had the numbers 060606 on it. All right, so there is, we go to the next slide, and there it is. That's the name of the patent. Now we go to the next slide. All right, it was during this time we talked about last week that we were reading the portion called Kitisa, which means when you take. This is talking about taking a census and giving a shekel for your life. So our family did that. We the following Monday after Friday the 13th, when everything broke loose, a war in heaven, so we decided to fill out the 2020 census, and we followed the Torah command about the shekels. So moving along to the next slide. And then here is, again, the same slide I showed earlier. And what I call this whole thing, this solution, if you will, this jab or snake bite, I call it the seed of the serpent, because what is happening here is there's a plan to change the seed, to alter the seed. And this has happened in history many times, as you know. It started with Adam and Eve, and it continued on through Noah, and also through Joseph, Moses, David, and even with the Messiah himself, with King Herod. So they're trying one more time to alter the seed, to alter the DNA. Go to the next slide. Okay, these are the 7 40-day markers. This is the first one we already went over. Here's this, and we go to the next slide. Here's the second one that started with Putin launching the Satan II missile. He did a test launch on Passover. I remember sitting at a Seder table, and my wife was handing the phone to me, say, "Look at that." And then we had several other events. Go to the third one. One of the most major events there was the Passover plague sign. You see up in the top right there. There was also a Rabbi Kaduri sign involving Bethula. All right, and we're going to be talking more in detail about Bethula Virgo in the future here. But this was the representation of the 3 blood moons. The 3 blood moons, it turned out, actually equated with the 3 failed elections of Israel. And then you had COVID-19, you had, and then it peaked at the Passover plague sign, which we're coming up to in just a week. You can always tell that Passover is right on schedule if you see the moon at the belly of Bethula Virgo. And so that is a very key sign. And why is that? Because, see, the farmers back in the day, they knew that they had to see a specific principal star called Spica, which means seed. It had to be above the horizon as the sun would set, and that would determine a barley harvest. All right, so here is one of the Bethuelahs. It was called the Kaduri sign. We talked about this last week. You see those two planets right there? God showed me that that when the election, the second failed election was taking place, that it was deadlocked, and I clued in right away. I said, deadlocked. I wonder what's going on in the heavens. And I looked up, and it just so happens to be the same direction I'm looking right now. I looked up, and there was Bethulah Virgo and two planets stuck together. So if you go to that next slide, you'll see what I'm talking about. All right. And then I did my own little fabrication here. So you have, but before we go to that slide, you have to the right, you have Mars, which is a bully planet, an agitator, gets in everybody's business, just won't leave us alone, wants to mess things up for us. It's a war planet. So, but there was a war in heaven during this time. And it was because of a prophetic thing that took place, that there would be no government for a particular period of time. And a Kabbalist rabbi, yes, believe it or not, a Kabbalist rabbi made a prediction 40 years before that there was going to be this very kind of election to the very year. And he said that there would be two Benjamins that would not be able to make a decision. And so you have these two planets, they're deadlocked. And he even said that there would be a deadlock. There would not be a decision. And then you see the sun at the head. That's another clue that you know that it's going to be the head of the year, Rosh Hashanah. Now, it's not the religious New Year, because I know some of you out there listening, you go, wait a minute, John Reed Austin, the head of the year is really Passover. You are absolutely right. But also there is when creation of the earth took place, and that was on the 1st of Tishri. And so that would be the Rosh Hashanah, or Yom Teruah, the day of the blowing. But there's those two planets you see there right at the shoulder, which represents shoulder of government. And two people that were running for that government were deadlocked. So that's Venus and Mercury. So now the next slide, you see what I did there. Jeremiah 31:4 actually says, you can look this up, that Israel is my virgin. And that's what Virgo means. It means virgin. So this constellation actually represents us in the nations. But this is also representing the Jewish people in Israel. So you have Mars, you have the 70 nations. There was actually a council of 70 nations. They wanted to pass these, they wanted to reenact these Noahide laws and or Noahide laws. And they were using Kundalini spirits and things like this. And this brought a war in heaven. And there you have Benny Gantz and Benjamin Netanyahu neck and neck with each other. Two Benjamins, shoulder of government, they're deadlocked. All right, go to the next slide. So now you have the 340-day markers. This is the third one. And this, the very last one ends on January 31st. Actually, that's an incorrect date there. I meant to change that. That's supposed to be 2019. It's supposed to be January 20th, 2019. So that was the beginning of Donald Trump's third year in office. And it was on Tu B'Shavat, which is called the New Year of Trees. All right. Now we have a fourth one we talked about. And this is when we had the Democratic National Convention that happened on a dark moon. A dark moon is when the sun is so close to the moon you can't see it. And there was a Hagia Sophia sign. This is when the Hagia Sophia was one of the oldest churches in the world, was converted into a mosque. And there was all kinds of signs that were going on in the heavens. And I cover this in one of my videos called The Next 7 Years, Part 2. And I'm working on a third one right now too. So it's going to be almost as long as the first two videos. There's been so much going on because I had no idea. I think everybody thought that, Donald Trump was probably going to win the next election. We had no idea that all this mess was going to go on. But here we are. So the November 3rd was preceded by an asteroid. And that was the third 40-day marker, U.S. election. And then we go to the fifth one. The fifth one, and we show that Donald Trump was on trial, and then he was acquitted, and it was bookended by 2 earthquakes and a dark moon. And then we have that going all the way to a lunar eclipse on May 26th and June 10th, a solar eclipse. All right, going to the sixth one, we had a blue moon, we had a new moon, and we had a blood moon. So a lot of moon stuff. And I'll tell you what, the moon has a lot of weight when it comes to events. Why? Well, think about it. The moon causes the tides to rise and fall. And we're made of 75% of water. So, you can imagine that it can affect your moods. And it does happen to do, it can affect the moods of politics, of weather, all kinds of things. So look at the weather. There was a lot of action in the weather. There was at least 4 major hurricanes. In fact, there were so many, they ran out of letters. All right, so that was the sixth one. And then here is the seventh one. So here we are. We started off with the Pluto opposition. Now, that was on the 22nd of February. So it was 2/22/2022. Fascinating. So if you were just to take the numbers 222, you multiply it by 8, it equals 1776. Well, Pluto, it was called Pluto returns because it was the first time in 246 years that it was in direct opposition with the Earth and the Sun, in perfect alignment. And the last time that happened was on Independence Day, 1776, when our nation became a power. And so Pluto actually represents, it represents calamity. It represents death or life. It also represents transformation. And so we know that our nation was going through a transformation at that time. So what is going on now that we see regarding Pluto in transformation and calamity? Well, so we understand, we can look at the next slide. Pluto is a bringer of war, death, calamity, and transformation. And this is going to be in a period of 2022 to 2024. A lot of people believe that 2024, when the next eclipse comes, is the end of the exile. So where we begin to have our return to the land of Israel. Now we go to the next slide. Now I want to read something to you, and we're going to follow the slides, but a lot of people are asking if this is the Gog and Magog war, because see, what happened was just 2 days later, actually, after the Pluto return, we saw the war begin with Russia and Ukraine. So now they're thinking, well, is this the Gog and Magog war, or will it possibly lead up to it? So April 1st, 2022, there was a parade of planets that occurred during the dark moon. Remember what the dark moon is? It's too close to the sun. So immediately preceding the new moon, which would be on April 3rd. Now I started putting a 40-day count from 2/22, and the next 40-day marker would be, or I should say the first 40-day marker would be April 3rd. So it would actually fall on a new moon. You can't call that coincidence. I mean, I'm going to tell you something. By the time I get done with this program, you're going to go, you just can't make this up. So the word Gog, it's actually pronounced Gug and Magog. All right. So the word Gog, you go to the next slide, it's spelled Gimel Vav Gimel. In the Paleo Hebrew, it represents a camel. So go to the next slide, and a nail. So, or a hook. And then another Gimel in ancient times. So these are more of the modern versions of the Hebrew letters, but they actually represented a camel in ancient Paleo Hebrew. So this is all based on Ezekiel 38. But in ancient times, there was no camels in Russia, geographic areas. But what these letters also represent, go to the next slide, is a rich man that gives. So we have 2 of the richest men in the world, each having varied opinions. Would you all agree? In fact, everybody seems to have an opinion about Putin and about Biden and about Zelensky. So we have these two richest men in the world, and the man in the middle is, and you see, he's the one that's kind of in between those opinions. So these are the two Vladimirs. We'll go ahead into the next slide. So these are two Vladimirs. They're spelled a little bit different, but they have the same name. And the man in the middle is the hook or nail. And so he's stuck between these two opinions. So Ezekiel 38 talks about how God will put hooks in their jaws and draw them to war. So I believe this man in the middle is the one that's drawing these guys to war. I'll tell you why in a minute. It says, I will, in verse 4 of Ezekiel 38, I will turn you around, put hooks in their jaws, and lead you out with all your army, horses and horsemen, all splendidly clothed, a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. So go to the, I think we go to the, there we go. Okay, so right there, you see Pluto, which is Vladimir Putin planet, representing the letter Gimel. He's a rich man with an opinion. And for the first time in 246 years, Pluto, representing a new transformation as a bringer of war and calamity, enters into the exact constellation alignment, positioning for the very first time since the very day that the United States faced the onset of that same war or calamity and transformation on Independence Day, July 4th, 1776. The other Vladimir Zelensky is represented by Venus, which is in conjunction with Saturn, the evil planet. And then bookended on the other side is Mars, which is represented by Biden and the letter Vav. So God's using Biden to hook these two countries into a war because he has something to hide. I wonder what he has to hide. Well, Venus is currently the morning star, and the Messiah, which formerly had representation as Benjamin Netanyahu, but his name and influence has been reassigned, kind of like an old football jersey, put in the heavenly court, or a trading floor, because see, the new face of government has taken over, and so therefore Venus now has a new face. So Benjamin Netanyahu's no more also, so that's why this planet has been reassigned. Now, let me just break here for a moment. You're probably thinking, well, how can you put a face on a planet? Where does it say that in the Bible? I'm so glad you asked. Do you remember the story of Joseph when he came to his brothers? He says, hey, I had a dream. He says, I had a dream that there was the sun and the moon and stars, and they were all bound down to me. He went to his father and said the same thing. And he talked about the sheaves of wheat and all this stuff. He says, what is this crazy dream you're dreaming that we're going to bow down to you? So he had a clue. And, back in those days, they would do this sort of thing. It would assign things. It all represented something. The constellation of Ariel Leo is the line of the tribe of Judah. And I just explained to you that the face of Virgo is Israel. That's us hidden in the nations. So now we have, Zelensky is represented by Venus. And Venus is the morning star, and his influence has been reassigned. Now Saturn is eclipsing two stars. So if you go forward, we're not seeing that. Okay, go backwards. Let's go back to. Okay, there we go. That's it. So. You look there. This took place during Purim on March 17th. Now let me get my bearings here for a minute. Okay, so back where I was. Okay, so we have representing here two stars. You can't see them very well except for the one that says Deneb, which is a Arabic word for tail of the goat. In Hebrew, it's Shedi. And then next to it is another Hebrew word. It's Nashirah, and Nashirah means the bringer of good news. So Saturn, the evil planet, is getting ready to eclipse these two stars. So it has something to hide, if you follow me. All right. So we're still on this slide. And so it's Shedi and Nashirah in the tail of the sea goat called Gedi. And Gedi represents the financial trading floor where Biden is trying to hide a message that would be good news for us. Well, just recently, Biden said that he's going to release or create $1 million per day in oil reserves in order to distract us, in my opinion, with a false flag to lower the gas prices. See, when you start seeing the gas prices going down, everybody relaxes and they don't even pay attention to what's going on with the war and all the things about the child trafficking that is trying to be that may be exposed. They're not going to pay attention to this stuff because they're going to be so caught up with other news. So now we go to the next constellation. We have the water urn coming from Aquarius, also known as Delhi. Oh, okay. We're still on that other side. That's Ariel Leo. And Ariel Leo is also during Purim. And you see the full moon there? Okay, so you always know when it's Purim and it's a full moon, just like Passover. All right, go ahead and move forward. All right, now go one more. All right, so we have the sun. Let's keep going. We got a little bit behind ourselves here. Oh, here's what I want to tell you. We talked about the 17th of March was Purim. Well, did you know that on March 29th, there was 17 what they call them solar flares or CMEs, coronal mass ejection. There were 17 of them in the same spot. I found that highly unusual. And the first thing that came to my mind was that I wonder how many days till Passover. And it was 17 days. On the 15th of April, that's this coming week from this coming Friday. So I believe that that was sort of like a gentle reminder. God said, hey, it's time to get ready, clean your house, get all the leaven out, the sin, start cleaning your cupboards of anything that has leaven in it, baking soda, could be, what is the one thing that we always seem to, yeast, you have to get your glasses out and you have to read the fine print. It's got yeast in it or not. So God is giving us a gentle reminder. It's time to spring clean your house. So then we go to the next slide. All right. So this was an amazing event that took place. And so we have Trump has been asking Putin to expose Hunter Biden. So go to the next slide. So at this point, Nashra and Shetty are both eclipsed. And then we go to the water urn. You see Neptune and Jupiter, right? So Trump is actually, he has something in his back pocket. He's about ready to let the cat out of the bag, so to speak. Neptune actually means big or huge. And, Donald Trump, he would always say, huge. All right. So there's a huge message being hidden in the same way that the evil planet Saturn is hiding a message that was supposed to bring good news from the star called Nashira in the tail of the goat. And so Trump has been asking Putin to expose Hunter Biden. And I just saw some pictures of him sporting a new tattoo on his back. You should take a look at that. You can Google tattoo Hunter Biden, and it'll show you some pretty interesting stuff. All right, then further to the left of the conjunction you see there is yet another conjunction where the sun is bleaching out the dark moon. You can't really see the dark moon there. It's off to the left. But I think right next to the tail, I think is where the dark moon is. And in 2 days, the new moon should appear. So also importantly, the messenger planet, Mercury, is behind the sun. And so this is yet another indication about a hidden message that's about to be revealed. So you have Pluto. Let's go to the next slide. You have Pluto. You see it right there. Okay, that's Putin. It's on the outside, entering the house of Getty as a bringer of war, calamity, and transformation. And Pluto, or Putin, seems isolated. You see that there? All the planets are further away to the left from the other planets because it is still to the right of the head of Getty, the sea goat, also known as Capricorn. And there's a triple conjunction of Saturn, Venus, and Mars, which indicates that there's a leaning towards trying to hide information about Ukraine and Vladimir Zelensky. So, and you also have two major conjunctions in the house of Dagin. So go to the next slide. And so we're coming up to Passover. Go to the next slide. Should be, there we go. All right. So you have two major conjunctions in the house of Dagim, Pisces, still very close to the water and representing an outpouring of information that has been held in secret. So now we come up to Passover. And what's really fascinating about this is you go to, there you go, stay right there. Okay. Now look at to the left there. You see Donald Trump. You can't see Neptune anymore. Isn't that fascinating? So he's really concealing some information for the right moment. And then you have on to the right, you see how the planets are all spread out. It's kind of like a parade of planets, if you will. So one of them is Venus in the outpouring, and then you have Mars and Saturn. All right, now we go to the next sign. This is Tela. It could be a ram or a lamb. This represents Passover. So if you see the sun nearing the lamb, you know that Passover is near. And this is how the tribes were able to, Issachar in particular, had the gifting a knowledge of the stars. They had to know where they had to be able to see the seed called spica above the horizon, determine that it was time for the harvest. So go to the next slide. And there you go. The full pink moon right on schedule. 2 years ago, it was right on schedule. It was right there in the belly of Virgo, the Virgin, otherwise known as Bethula. And so this is representing the birthing of something. So we see that Spica is down on the bottom there. And if you look in the far left corner on the bottom, do you see that red line going down kind of in an angle? That's the path of the sun. All right. So we know that, or I should say, not the path of the sun, but it's actually the where the sun would rise. So that is the horizon, if you will. So it's in an angle, but Bethula is clearly above the horizon now. And so they know that at night when the sun goes down, they should be able to see the full moon rise, and they should be able to see Spica right close to it. And they'll say, it's time for Passover. Now we go to the next one. Now there you have, that's, I want to just do a little, I know there's a lot of people asking questions right now and saying, John Reed Austin, how do you know so much about, I mean, I thought that Passover was the beginning of the year, not Rosh Hashanah, Yom Torah. So why do a lot of people start with why do they start with Aries? Why is Passover and the sun? I mean, if it's in Aries, that should represent the new year, right? Yes, you are correct. It's the new year, the new religious year. But then there's several new years. There's actually 4 of them. And one of the other major ones is Tu B'Shavat, which is Year of Trees. So we talked about that earlier. And then you have Yom Teruah, or Tishri 1, which is the civil new year. And this is the time where the days of awe, when they get ready for Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, and then Feast of Tabernacles. So we are at Passover and the sun is at Aries, right? So why is everybody starting with Aries and not with Virgo? So the new year begins at Passover, the religious year. Now the sun is in Bethula's head, which is Rosh Hashanah. And Rosh Hashanah is at the civil new year. Now, the fact is, nearly every culture, oh, sorry, I had an itch. I didn't mean to do that. So every culture has their version of what they call the zodiac, including New Agers that are into astrology and the horoscope, which is actually the language of the occult. The only culture that preserves the original is Egypt. So let's go to the next slide. And this is how I can prove to you that Virgo is supposed to be the first of the signs of the Mazarot. You don't start with Aries, you start with Virgo. So let me explain here. You look at the right side there, you see the lion. There's a lion looking at Virgo, or the Virgin. holding up a sword. So it begins and ends with Leo is the last sign, and then it begins with Virgo. Okay, so that's how it's supposed to be. You see Leo on the left, actually, and the Sphinx is in the center, and Virgo. So Virgo is always supposed to be the start. So you go from right to left, and it ends with Leo. And notice how Leo is looking at Virgo. Okay, so you have the end, you have the beginning and the end. Okay, let's go to the next slide. That's actually called the ceiling of the portico of the Temple of Esta. All right, so now let's talk about 120 Jubilees. This is a very touchy subject. I've been asked a lot of questions about this because when we had the Revelation 12 sign in 2017, it was I believe it was the 120th Jubilee. So, but before I go into that, just hold that thought right there on 120 Jubilees. I want to expound more on why Virgo is the first. So how do I know it has to begin with Virgo? Well, it was the original year, or I should say until God changed. It was the original year until God changed it. Remember in Exodus, he says, this is going to be a beginning of years for you. All right, so Passover became the new year after that. It was taught by Adam. It was taught by Noah and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph and even Moses. And so we're not there yet. We're not at that. Just stay on that right there. 120 Jubilees. Thank you. Okay, so it was the season of the Messiah's birth. There's another reason why. It arrives, Aries was the season of the Messiah's death. So you start with a birth and end with a death. All right, pretty simple. It is also the time that we atone for our dysfunction in life, Yom Kippur. Now, so we looked at Virgo and Leo and the Revelation 12 sign, and Virgo is Israel, we're the scattered to the nations, and Leo is Judah, so the Jewish people. Let me see if we have the Revelation 12 sign up there. Do we not? Okay, let's not. Let's keep going back there. Go back one more. Let's see if it's on there. Okay, we don't have it. Okay, but when in the Revelation 12 sign, there was all the stars, the principal stars that was in the Revelation 12 sign, and then when the planets moved in, the wandering stars, it created a diadem of 12 stars representing the 12 tribes of Israel. So we're seeing the reunion of the nations, that's Israel, scattered to the nations, represented by Virgo, the Virgin. It's coming back together with Leo, which is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. So they're opening their hearts to those who were scattered, that gave up the Torah, teaching and instruction of God. So this was a sign of the end of the exile. All right, so now let's go. We're at 120 Jubilees. Go to the next sign. So I had, a lot of preachers teach that Noah was that it took 120 years for him to build the ark. But that's incorrect, because the scripture is pretty clear that we have in chapter 5 of verse 32 in Genesis, it says, and Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begot Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Next, the next one over. And here's Genesis 7. And it says the following. It says, for in just 7 days I will make it rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. And I will wipe from the surface of the ground every living thing that I have made. Then Noah did everything that Yahweh had commanded him. Noah was how old? 600 years old. So how long did it take him to build the ark? Doesn't say 120, does it? It's 100 years. So when the floodwaters came upon the earth, verse 10, and 7 days later, the floodwaters came upon the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, and so on and so on and so on. All right, next slide. Now I want to show you a book called the Book of Jubilees. Now, this has the account of Noah. It's very interesting. Watch this. It says, and Noah made the ark in all respects as Yahweh commanded him. in the 27th Jubilee of years, in the 5th week, in the 5th year, on the new moon of the 1st month. And he entered in the 6th year thereof, in the 2nd month, on the new moon of the 2nd month, till the 16th. And he entered, and all that he brought to him into the ark. And Yahweh closed it from without on the 17th evening. All right, and now, so we see that in that context there, we have a thing called Jubilee, the 27th Jubilee of years. Do you see that there? So what is a Jubilee? Well, Jubilee is 50 years. And you have what is called Shemitas. There's 7 of them, which brings us to 49 years. And after the 7th Shemitah, which is actually a rest year, you rest from your labors, the crops, and you released any debts. And then back in the day, you released slaves. So everything, you even return land. But there's actually 1 year that still needs to be fulfilled, and that's called the Jubilee year, which is actually a copy, like a repeat of a Shemitah. It's actually treated like a Shemitah. So one of the reasons why I'm going to show you why I believe that 2017 was the 120th Jubilee. So God said, I will not strive with man forever, but I will number his days 120 years. So it has nothing to do with an ark being built in 100 years or 120 years. So we'll go to the next slide. I will show you what happened in 1917. This was the 118th Jubilee. It was called the Balfour Declaration by Lord Balfour. He said that Jewish people need a homeland. And then it was fulfilled in 1947. And then in 1948, Israel became a state. All right. And then in 1967, well, some things happened and they had to go recapture Jerusalem. It was called the 6-Day War. That's the next slide. And it was 1967. We'll go to the next slide. Now you see here the graph. You see the Zionist Conference in 5617. And you see in 5677, the Balfour Declaration, which was the Gregorian year 1917. And you see 50, 50, 50 on the very top there. Okay. Well, Jerusalem was recaptured in the 119th Jubilee. And then 70 years later, they become a nation state. All right. I covered that in one of my videos called The Next 7 Years, Part 2. So actually, I think it's in Part 1. All right. Then you go from 1967 to 2017. That's another Jubilee. All right. So Jerusalem is declared the capital by Donald Trump. Go to the next slide. All right. Now, I'm hearing a lot of this stuff like, oh, this is a Shemitah year. I'm like, what? How is it a Shemitah year? There was a Shemitah year in 1966. And then the very next year was the Jubilee, right? But what they're doing is these banks, they're calling their own Shemitah. And they're saying 7 years, 7 years, 7 years, 7 years, 7 years. But there's no Jubilee. Where's the Jubilee? In fact, we've had no Jubilee for the last 2 years. So we're 2 years off. So they said, oh, there was a Jubilee in 2015. But that was during the tetrads of the 4 blood moons. So 2016 should have been a Shemitah year. And then the following year would be a Jubilee. And it was right on August 21st, 2017. Let's go to the next slide. All right, now this took me a while to put this together, but these represent Jubilee years. And so if we go to where it says 2017 and you count them, there's 7. If you counted backwards to the Battle of Isis, there's 70 Jubilees. That's the year 333 before Common Era. You can go to Wikipedia, and it tells you that Alexander fought the Battle of Isis against Darius III, and he won. And that is exactly 70 Jubilees. So if you go back 20 more Jubilees, that's another 1,000 years. You come to when Joshua crossed the Jordan into the Promised Land. The 50th year, and this is in the book of Jubilees, by the way. It says on the 49th Jubilee, he began to enter into the land. So it was right before the 50th Jubilee. And of course, they couldn't harvest anything because it was a rest year. All right, now go to the next slide. When they went into Israel, it ended their exile of 38 years plus 2, which was 40 years. So they left Egypt, and the second year they screwed up. and they were forced to wander the wilderness to complete a 40-year of testing. And so 38 years before the next solar eclipse of or the previous eclipse that we had in 2017 was 38 years, representing the end of the exile. Next slide. This here is the 3 solar eclipses, 2 that have not occurred yet. And I think we talked about this last week, but there's going to be one in the Four Corners on 2023, 7 days after the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, notice on the bottom there, you see that looks like an A that fell over on its side. That's the ancient Paleo-Hebrew letter Aleph. And so you see how it looks like an Aleph there. Go to the next slide. Go to the next slide there, please. There you go. Okay, so now we go to the next slide. There is the Tav. You see the letter T there. All right, and this is going to be the 2017 and the 2024 eclipse. Now, this was also if you go to the next slide, the epicenter where it crisscrosses there is called a little area called Little Egypt in southern Illinois. And so it's called Cairo, Illinois. It's right near Carbondale. Go to the next slide. We talked about this last week, that the path of the sun in 2017 went through 7 Salems. You had Salem, Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming, Nebraska, Missouri, Kentucky, North Carolina. And those of you who watched me last week, you saw that I corrected my little grammatical errors. It wasn't South Carolina, it was North Carolina. And Wyoming is spelled with a W-Y instead of a W-I. Now, did you know that there's going to be 7 more Salems crossed over with the last eclipse? So look at the next slide. And you see Texas, Arkansas, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Maine. Where are you going to be? Well, I plan to be in Indiana. All right. So then we have the next slide. What are we going to see? We're going to see this great giant menorah in the sky that I believe represents a great outpouring. I'm not sure what it'll entail, but you see there's a conjunction of Saturn and Mars. And then in the Pisces Dagim constellation, you see Venus, you see the sun, and you see Mercury, and you see the moon, or new moon there, which is eclipsing the sun. And then you have Intella and Shur the bull, otherwise known as Taurus. You have Jupiter. So count them there. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You have 8 different bodies there, not counting the sun. Okay, go to the next one. All right, so I want to remind you that we'd like you to go to our website, wineoilbreadforheart.org, where we have product, and we also are taking donations. Right now, we have a building project that we're working on, and you can go to my YouTube channel, watch our 8.5-minute video that talks about our trip there, and we're trying to raise money to finish a project that we started. We're about a third way through it, and so we're building a popular diner for street kids. And so we are going to hopefully have this done here very soon. So if you'd like to give to our ministry, we'd really appreciate your help. And so I'm wondering if we got anybody that has any questions that have sent to our website already. But we got about a minute and a half left. And so we're going to continue next week. One of the things that we're looking for right now is the event that's going to happen on Passover. And I talked to you about that, and we don't know what's going to happen, but all the planets are sprawled out, like I call it the parade of planets. We just started the first 40-day marker, which was April 3rd. That was a new moon. The next one is going to be around the 13th of May, which is a couple of days before Israel's birthday, and also the war, the Arab-Israeli war that was back in 1947, 48, and 49. So then we're going to be looking in the rearview mirror next week of what happened during the time of this prophetic event. And so we'll be watching the news. Send me your comments. If you'd like to be a researcher for me, I'd really appreciate it. could help you. If you find something in the news that you think kind of goes along with what's happening right now in the heavens, I would appreciate that. So anyway, my name is John Reed Austin. I want to thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you next week, right before Passover. And make sure that you like and subscribe to our channel. Make sure you visit John Reed Austin YouTube and look for my latest video. And I want to wish you a Chag Sameach, happy Passover, and get those cupboards cleaned out. And I also want to inform you that we're going to be heading out to Villa, Indiana. I'm going to be doing a concert there on the 16th of April. So Passover will be the first day, and then we'll be. That's my alarm going off. I can't seem to get it turned off. I think it's turned off now. All right, so I'll be going out there for the 16th to do a concert. I got a new CD coming out. If you'd like to do a pre-order, you can go onto my website. It's going to be called Awaken the Fire, and it's restoring the hymns of the ages. So I think you really would enjoy it. It hasn't been released yet, but it's going to be released probably sometime towards the end of May. And but if you'd like to get one, I appreciate it. So ironic blessing I'm going to give you at this moment. Yivarecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav alecha v'yihunecha, Yisa Adonai panav alecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you, be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. In the name of the Prince of Peace, Yeshua the Messiah. Remember to look up to the heavens, because your redemption is drawing nigh.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hugie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.